Let's talk about some updates in the case of Ethan Liming. He was a 17-year-old boy who was beaten to death at LeBron James' I Promise school in Akron, Ohio. Ethan didn't attend that school. He attended Firestone CLC. However, because LeBron's name is attached to the I Promise school, that's one reason this case is getting plenty of attention. I've got a lot of updates about the 3 murder suspects who appeared in court recently and all this brouhaha that's occurring around this case. Unfortunately, this case has the potential to become a huge case because of the racial implications that are already pitting people against each other on crazy extremes. On the one hand, I watched a YouTube video where one black guy is saying, oh, these 3 murder suspects were just innocent boys and it's no fault of their own that they were attacked, and oh my goodness. On the other extreme, I watched a different YouTuber, Jason Whitlock. He's a journalist I really respect, but his extreme was dressing up LeBron in a white hat. I don't want to say the word. Dressing up LeBron in this garb and calling LeBron a racist for not even speaking out more about Ethan's death. Let's get into all these things, upcoming court dates, and more. First off, according to YouTube, many people are searching for the Ethan Liming security footage, the surveillance footage, and I'm praying we have good videos somewhere of what actually happened during this fight. Video footage that can ultimately convince a jury to convict these murder suspects of Ethan's death. Like police often say, people lie, but the evidence doesn't. If we have a video, we might be able to see more clearly what actually happened that fateful night when Ethan died. It was June 2nd. Ethan and 3 friends apparently took this toy or took this gun, either a weapon, if you want to call it that, as one of the murder suspects' lawyers calls it, or a toy, as Ethan's dad calls it. You'll see the difference in languaging here too as well. Apparently, we don't know who was firing these shots, and one of the lawyers says it was frozen Orbeez, so they were hurtful, at these 3 men and 1 woman on the basketball court of LeBron's school, and that's what precipitated this horrible chain of events. So let's talk about what happened. First off, Ethan Liming's dad told the news that the cameras at LeBron James' I Promise school are, quote, grossly insufficient. We know from a recent press conference that Akron police said they tried to get all sorts of video footage from surrounding businesses. One of the murder suspect's lawyers called LeBron's school well lit. So I'm hopeful that if it is well lit at night, and I should just drive over there to see what it looks like at night, if it is that well lit, hopefully surrounding businesses were able to catch the action. We don't know if any surrounding businesses are actually pointed towards the basketball courts and the back parking lot area. If the I Promise school cameras are grossly insufficient, it makes me worried that we won't ultimately see good surveillance footage of what actually happened that night. Perhaps we will be able to rely on what witnesses have told police about the events of that night thus far. If you want to see the full video of the 3 murder suspects in court recently, you can visit WKYC. They covered the entire thing. So I'm going to break down for you what happened in court. And I'm going to break down a lot of the research I've done into the murder suspects and how it might tie into this pending upcoming grand jury decision, as well as what could be one of the most heated trials we've seen in a while. All 3 murder suspects have entered technical not guilty pleas at this point. Today, as I record this, it is Tuesday, June 21st, the first day of summer, and part of me is just envisioning protests and everything over this case. But why do we have to have such extremes? Why do we have to have an extreme on this end saying, oh, it's Ethan's fault and his friends, they shouldn't have started it, they never should have had a gun or a toy gun, and they got what was coming to them? Or on this end, oh, those 3 murder suspects, put them beneath the jail, and you know the rhetoric. Why can't we have someone, like I like to stay close to the middle and just figure out what does the evidence tell us at this point? That's what we're going to talk about. So, murder suspect number 1 is Donovan Jones. And he spells his name a little weird, Donovon, Jones. Now, sadly, Donovan just turned 21 and he has a baby on the way. He has an Akron, Ohio address listed. The next thing on the docket for Donovan is dated July 12th, oddly right after midnight. The status is pending grand jury and it's before an arraignment judge. In essence, it's the next step in the process. The arraignment is the first appearance, usually, where there is a formal reading of charges and bond, if any, is discussed. This pending grand jury next hearing is usually a secret grand jury, which can just be normal citizens sometimes, and they're just listening to the prosecutors, the witnesses. They're determining if there's enough evidence to move forward with the charges, and I'm sure there will be. Now, for Donovan, he was represented by Jim Corley, and that is a public defender attorney out of Summit County. He will also represent another of the murder suspects, and you will glaringly see the difference between a public defender and private counsel representing a defendant. You could barely hear Mr. Corley speak in court in the video. It was just so rote, and he's just so used to doing this, I'm sure. He just presented the judge with what he says was a cursory conversation with Donovan, just letting him know what his charges were. And those charges are murder, felonious assault, and disrupting public service. Now, according to the probable cause affidavit, it alleges that Donovan Jones did knowingly cause harm to Ethan Liming. The result of the felonious assault resulted in the death of Ethan Liming. It says that Jones was involved in an altercation with Liming, and it says that Donovan Jones punched and assaulted Ethan. It says that Donovan beat Ethan until he was unconscious, and then beat Ethan even more when he was unconscious on the ground. It says Donovan kicked and stomped Ethan several times in the head, resulting in his death. The arrest affidavit also says that when Ethan's friends tried to take Ethan away, take him to the hospital, it says Donovan assaulted all three of Ethan's friends. The last names of those friends have been released by Fox News, even though they did redact parts of the affidavit. I have put in my request, my Freedom of Information Act request, to get the full affidavit from Akron Municipal Court. Donovan Jones even took one of Ethan's friends, or either Ethan's phone, when one of them was attempting to call 911 to get help. From the map I created and found directions, you will see that Donovan lives only a 6-minute walk away from the basketball courts at the I Promise school. No wonder local gossip has said that the murder suspects usually played at that court previously. They weren't new to it. And now that I see that 2 of the 3 live so close, it's no wonder they would just walk over there, a 6-minute walk, meet at the courts, and play a game of basketball. The only thing the public defender Jim Crowley said about Donovan is that he does have close ties to the area in Akron with his mom, dad, brothers, and sisters. He has been employed for 2.5 years at a warehouse. He didn't specify which one, but I immediately thought of some place like Amazon or DHL or something. They talked about bond. Ultimately, bond for all 3 ended up at $1 million with 10% cash. So if they could have come up with $100,000, which none of them did, as I understand it, then they're staying in jail. They talked about pre-trial supervision. They talked about this scram monitoring type bracelet, and they spoke about surrendering any passports and the like. And that was pretty much it. Donovan, just like the other 2 murder suspects, appeared on screen, so they weren't there in the courtroom in person, which has kind of been the norm since March 2020. All 3 suspects looked a little befuddled. Some maybe understood more than others, but it was a really quick appearance. After that, it was like, who's next? The bailiff said due to separate issues, we're going to have to take Mr. Jones back, so I'm not sure what exactly was going on with Donovan. Now it was time for murder suspect number 2, Desean Stafford. Desean Stafford was on the phones at that point. I'm not sure if he was speaking with his private attorney, but once you hear the way his attorney defended him, you will see the big difference between a criminal defense attorney who you give a retainer to versus one who is a public defender. I'm sure they both work very, very hard. Both are bulldogs, but you will see the difference here. While we were waiting for Desean Stafford to appear, other defendants appeared before him. The bailiff came back and said, "Your Honor," telling the judge, "Mr. Stafford is still on the phone." So finally came Desean Stafford. "Here is Desean Stafford," they said. Now, when I was researching in the Akron courts for information about Desean Stafford, I came across a whopping 34 cases of criminal history. But the bulk of them belonged to a man I believe might be his dad. Only 2 of those entries were related to this younger Stafford. The bulk of the charges attributed to the 46-year-old Desean Stafford were from a man born March 18, 1976. He's potentially the father of this second murder suspect because even though I never found addresses that matched up, I did find they share the exact same name: Desean Antoine Stafford. The elder Stafford even had one address listed as homeless in Akron, and he had domestic violence charges, drug trafficking charges. If this man is in fact the dad to the younger Desean Stafford, now headed toward most likely a trial for the murder of Ethan Liming, it does make me feel sorry for this murder suspect. Again, I am not excusing anything that was done, but it does give me empathy or sympathy. He's only 20 years of age. He was born October 23rd, 2001. I think about this 46-year-old man, if he is in fact his dad, with a long laundry list of charges for domestic violence, drugs, and the like. What must his son have endured, perhaps at the hands of his dad, if it is the same man at all? And what did he learn in order to pass on and push out into the world in the form of beating Ethan to death, allegedly? It makes you wonder about the generational curses involved here. Now, the young 20-year-old murder suspect, Desean Stafford, he only lives a 7-minute walk away from the I Promise school. So you can see again why it would be easy to just trot on over there and play a game of basketball anytime you feel like it. This is where we could see the difference in attorneys. Desean, or Sean as his attorney, made it well known his family obviously retained this private attorney for him. He is the only one of the 3 murder suspects that has a private attorney at this point that I know of that appeared in court to represent them. So this man's name is John Sin, Attorney John Sin, and he is definitely a bulldog. He spoke up and loud and you could hear him, and he was already fighting for his client. His website says that Attorney John has more than 20 years helping folks just like you navigate the justice system. It's really important to have a good lawyer on your side, or even to understand the legal process. He's widely recognized as one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the Akron area. Aggressive legal representation you can count on. That is a direct quote from his Facebook page. And he recently posted for a homicide, attempted murder, vehicular manslaughter, or death penalty case, call John directly. Attorney John Sin is familiar with all possible legal defense strategies to get the best results for clients and their families. He even has a photo of like a mom hugging a freed defendant. So I think this is going to be the biggest case of Attorney Sin's life, and I think he'll end up with the most media attention unless someone else signs on, unless Ben Crump or someone comes to town to defend these other boys. This one sounds like it'll be a doozy. Desean is facing murder and felonious assault charges just like Donovan. According to the arrest affidavit, Desean did knowingly cause a felonious assault that led to the death of Ethan Liming. It says similar language. Desean was in an altercation with Ethan. The same wording. Desean punched, kicked, stomped Ethan in the head until he died right there on the ground. And it was on the grounds of the I Promise school. I'm already watching misinformation spread frustratingly, where one YouTube creator is already trying to distance this murder away from LeBron's school somehow, not knowing anything about the school or the setup. One creator was already claiming, "Oh, I really don't think this took place at all near LeBron's school. They're just trying to say it did." And It's really near the basketball courts. It's really near the parking lot. It could have been 2 blocks away. Well, no, it's not. Those of us who live here know exactly where it is, and we've been there. I think there's a lot of agendas, unfortunately, where people are willing to bend the truth just to get their point across. Now, I will admit, I've gotten a little bit of criticism because when I first came out, all I knew was what Ethan's family said. I hadn't had confirmation of the splatterball gun. I knew nothing about supposedly frozen Orbeez beads. I knew nothing about what precipitated this event as confirmed by police. Police later came out and finally showed us the splatterball gun and gave us the narrative of what was actually happening. We're still learning. I don't think Ethan or his friends should have been shooting a splatterball gun at anyone at any time, because that's illegal as well. And especially if you watch the videos on how they sound really scary and deadly. At the same token, I don't think Ethan should have been beaten to death. I will say, these murder suspects do have a case, but that doesn't mean they're going to be set free. Will charges get reduced? Will they be convicted on lesser counts? Perhaps, because now that we're learning more about what happened that night, you're going to have every side telling their end of the story to make themselves look the best. When this story first came out, all we heard was that Ethan was horsing around with some friends in the parking lot of the LeBron James school, and some guys over on the court didn't like that, so those guys attacked him and beat him to death. That's all we heard. That didn't make much logical sense to me, but that's what I was going with. But now, as time progresses, we learn that Ethan and his friends may have been the instigators, but maybe they were attempting an innocent Orbeez challenge. Stupid, naive folly is bound up in the heart of the youth, the Bible says, and you see why. Maybe they saw this on TikTok. Maybe they thought it'd be funny and cute to do, and now they know, unfortunately, in the worst way possible, that it wasn't. However, that doesn't mean I put the entire onus on Ethan nor his friends for his death. I think, unfortunately, it was the perfect storm of evil circumstances happening that led to his death. But if you watch, even one of the murder suspect's aunts appeared on the local news, and she even admitted, well, yeah, it shouldn't have gone that far. So even one of their own family members, their own aunts, admitted this kid should not have been beaten to death. And of course, no matter Ethan's race, he should not have died. I know a lot of people are attributing things based on race, but it is literally close to home. Ethan lived like 2-3 blocks behind me as I speak. Of course I want him to get justice. It's not really about the proximity, it's about the facts of the case spilling out. And as they stand now, from what I've been reading, he should not have died that night. He could have gotten arrested. There are other things and actions the murder suspects could have done. They were playing basketball so close to home, as we can see, at least these first two I'm going over, 6 minutes away from home, 7 minutes away from home. Initially, they began running away. What if they had just ran home, called the police, and the police hunted down Ethan and his friends and arrested them? Ethan would still be alive right now, most likely. But instead, when Ethan's friends attempted again to rescue him from the beating, Desean literally took Ethan's car and drove it to the other end of the parking lot. There's the difference between murder and homicide and premeditation. I don't think their lawyer can argue, oh, they were so afraid they didn't know what to do, and they didn't know they were harming him, and all this rhetoric that's starting to appear when you see the actual facts of what the arrest affidavit is saying, that Desean literally moved Ethan's car just to prevent him from getting help. In Desean's recent court appearance, they also spoke about unrelated charges in another case that Desean has. That case includes charges of willful fleeing, resisting arrest, damaging or endangering, and obstruction of an office building, and contempt of court. There's 2 contempt of court charges. Only one of them is still outstanding. Actually, that's why Desean was scheduled to appear this morning in court to answer that last charge. But Johnson did tell the judge that he has been retained by Desean Stafford's family to represent him. I wonder how much he paid for a retainer. That's when he entered the technical not guilty plea. He entered that technical non-guilty plea to all charges. He called it just the matter of an outstanding class or something that Desean needed to take. He did make sure the judge knew that Desean had no prior felony records until now. He said something about all other charges are dismissed. Oh, just a failure to pull over. You can tell that he's really trying to lessen the record of Desean and make it all kind of sound like just mistakes. Even though Attorney Sin knew this wasn't the place for it, he said, I do feel like it's time to get into just a little bit of background on this case. John Sin did admit that the case has gotten attention, and at that point when they appeared in court, it hadn't even received as much attention as it has now. Just last night, I watched a video from News Nation covering this case. We know previously the Daily Mail has picked up on it. Local and national media have picked up on this case. Again, he said Sean is 20, no prior felony record. Attorney John Sin said that on the night in question, Desean and his brother and his cousin went up to the I Promise basketball courts to play basketball. He said, you know, Your Honor, these courts were given to the city in cases like this to help get the youth off the street and do something constructive, basically. The basketball courts were given to the neighborhood so that kids in this situation could get off the streets and get somewhere safe. He called them well-lit, all-night courts on a summer night. Now, it wasn't quite summer yet, technically. It was still spring, June 2nd, but he gave us important information if he's just not embellishing things, if the courts are really well-lit, and if they're meant to be played on all night. Well, yeah, that would look good in favor of the defendants. And that is one thing that is true, that LeBron James has done a lot for Akron, despite his detractors, and Jason Whitlock was going in really hard on him. I mean, wow. If you watch the video, you'd think LeBron is the devil. Now, I know that LeBron is doing a lot for Akron, and it's nice that those basketball courts were provided. LeBron knows how he grew up poor, and he wanted to provide things perhaps he didn't have as a young man. And I know personally people who have been helped by him. So I don't quite understand that extreme either, where people are willing to place so much blame on LeBron for Ethan's death. I do agree that I hope LeBron speaks out more. He did initially tweet to pray for our community right after the murder happened. But I do want to see LeBron saying Ethan Liming's name. I'd like to see him saying more about it. But as for people who think he should take total culpability somehow for the murder, no. But I do believe no matter the color of the person, we want to see justice. So it would be nice if he did speak out more, but I don't believe in either extreme. Some people are so extreme. Some people don't even want you mentioning the fact that this happened it is an Akron public school, but we also know it as LeBron's school because he's put a lot into it. It's gorgeous. He has his shoes up there on the wall. It is related to LeBron James, and he's given a lot. And there's an excellent documentary about the I Promise school on YouTube. We know it's had its issues. We know there can be troubled kids there. We know those teachers can work so hard for the kids. You see one end where people are so in love with LeBron and he can do no wrong that they don't even want you mentioning, some people are saying, why are you reporters mentioning that this happened at LeBron's school? Well, because that's a fact. That's where it happened. That's just where the murder took place. It's not that we're insinuating somehow it's LeBron's fault. So you have that extreme, and then you have the way other extreme where people are totally dogging out LeBron for not speaking out more, for not having better cameras, for not offering a reward before the alleged murderers were caught. I just want to stick to facts and see what we can unveil. Desean's lawyer did note that Desean is only 5 feet 5 inches tall and 130 pounds. I think that's an interesting fact to know because he's trying to speak of the diminutive stature of his client as if to really put a picture in our minds that this guy is not the threat. This guy was the one being threatened. The height of Ethan, I believe, is also mentioned during this court hearing, the initial arraignment, first appearance. Desean's lawyer said it was just the three of them playing basketball on the court. I'm assuming he's talking about the three males. I'm not sure where this one female was. If she was off just watching, I'm not sure her name or where she fits in. We know she was not arrested to my knowledge for anything. The lawyer says, well, this carload of teens, and then he kind of pauses and says, I guess adult teens. So he's making Ethan and his friends seem a little bit more adult teens. You know, he's really using semantics to play that game, as lawyers often do. The lawyer who can act and put on the best show and put a story in the minds of the jurors often sometimes wins the case for their clients, if the jury can't see through that. So these adult teens pulled into the lot, opened their window, and notice Desean's lawyer says, open fire with what seemed like a fully automatic firearm. At some point, he's going to literally call it a weapon. He said that weapon is now in custody of police. He's playing the game here. Desean's lawyer is playing that game. He is calling that Orbeez splatterball toy gun a weapon. He's comparing it to a fully automatic weapon. And if you do watch the videos, it really sounds like a weapon. A fully automatic paintball gun, he called it, that had been illegally modified by freezing the ammunition. Notice these words the lawyer is using. Desean's lawyer is calling it a weapon, fully automatic, illegally modified, freezing the ammunition. All these words are like bullets, whereas initially, Bill Lyman, Ethan's dad, is saying words like horsing around, toy. You know, some people online are saying, oh, it's just a water gun. I think this is something that, I didn't know what it was. A lot of people didn't know what the heck this splatterball gun thing was. With the Orbeez beads being frozen, these gel little bullet type things, people say they do hurt. I'm sure if they were frozen, I'm not sure if these three murder suspects were actually hit or if they were just in fear. But if you see the videos, it kind of looks scary. It does. Some unsuspecting person is there at their car loading groceries and someone does like a drive-by with like a splatterball gun and they want to laugh and they want to laugh at the person being afraid. Well, it went too far. Like they say, you know, you F around and find out. This was the worst way to find out. Desean's attorney said, then the boys from the other vehicle got out and chased Desean off the court. So now if we had video of this, we'd be able to verify who actually had the gun. I'm also seeing on social media, some folks are immediately saying, Ethan didn't have it. Ethan was just in the car talking with his friends, and it was the two other boys that got out and were doing this. As far as the police, the last official word they gave us was they did not know who was literally doing the shooting. They're still trying to figure that out. So I don't know where other people are assuming they know for sure who got out the car, who had the gun, who was shooting, who was chasing, what have you. Desean's attorney is saying that his client was assaulted on that basketball court. He's saying where my client has alleged to have defended himself. John Sin is saying, well, my client was shot at and with this illegally modified weapon, and then he defended himself. So turning around, I guess, and chasing the boys back to the car was, quote, defending himself. That's going to be the gist of this case, he said. So he's laying out a defense of self-defense, you can tell. The investigation, it's ongoing, and he's saying, yeah, it is a tragedy, but he's claiming the young man who died in this case allegedly got punched, hit the ground and hit the cement, and basically maybe it was the injury from the cement that caused his death, that caused the ultimate damage here. Now that's a stretch, but you know he had to try it, whereas we're reading an affidavit saying that each of these boys punched and kicked him and stomped Ethan's head. And, you know, Ethan's dad is saying you should have seen what they did to his beautiful face, and he sounds like he was almost unrecognizable. They were beating him allegedly after he was unconscious, kept beating him. One of them moved his car, one of them took a phone, prevented his friends from taking him to the hospital, calling 911, getting help. One was able to call 911. That's a big different story than what Desean's attorney is trying to say, where his attorney is attempting to say, oh yeah, they just punched him to defend themselves and whoops, he hit the concrete and died. I don't know if that'll make it. I don't know if that'll fly with a jury. And I always wish I could get on a jury. You never know. I always assume my role as this would-be reporter would exclude me, and I've never gone much far. I've never even made it to voir dire. So we'll see if we get to that point. And it's funny how John Sin said his clients were just playing basketball when some kids from outside the neighborhood, it would take me 10 minutes to get down there where Ethan was playing. Ethan lived right back here, 2-3 streets over. 10 minutes up to the I Promise school. That's kids outside the neighborhood? What is he insinuating? As if Ethan didn't belong there and the murder suspects did? But John Sin said they came with this crazy paintball gun and were spraying them. He tried to get the $1 million bond lessened. I think a lot of them were going for $500,000. He said, I don't think anyone's going to post bond anyway, so he should know their financial situation. I'm surprised they even came up with a retainer. I wonder how much it was, $1,000? I don't know. But he said, frankly, I don't think these families are going to make bond anyway, so he likely knows the deal. They made this one assumption about the pre-trial, watching these suspects, the scram bracelet monitoring, just in case by miracle they would come up with $100,000 and get out, and surrendered passports. And they made the assumption, they said, I don't think anyone here has a passport. Desean appears to say, if you watch the video, it appears as if he says, I have a passport. So it shows you, I don't know, the assumptions being made about the murder suspects, about race, about financial status, about everything. And that one thing stood out to me when he was just there on the screen, like, I have a passport. You have to read his lips because you can't even hear. That's one thing I hate about appearances not being in person. So maximum pretrial supervision, and Attorney John Sims said he's going to reserve his right to talk about bond later as well. The judge said sure, and this is the difference again between a private attorney. John Sin yelled out, I'll be down to see ya. So he was talking to his client saying, look, I'm going to go visit you, probably right there in that little attorney room if they're in Summit County Jail. So that's what a private attorney gets you versus a public defender who, has a cursory review of your charges with you. Now, finally, murder suspect number 3, Tyler Stafford. He's only 19, and what's odd about this case is he's the younger brother of Desean, but while Desean has this private attorney, Tyler has the public defender that Donovan Jones has, and Tyler has a Cleveland address, many, many miles. It would take him 10 hours to walk from his home listed to the I Promise basketball courts, and 45-minute drive from Cleveland to the I Promise school. Again, he's facing the murder and felonious assault charges, and it was back to public defender attorney Corley to represent him as a public defender on behalf of the Summit County Court. So again, they issued a technical not guilty. Attorney Corley did get into a little bit of trying to give the background of Tyler. He said his ties to the community are a little bit different. It's not full-time. He was separated at birth from his mother and from his brother at the time, but he had visitation where he would visit them. And the interaction over the years was through a caseworker. And that was about it for him. You see a fractured family just from if that is the dad related to any of these murder suspects and that long criminal history, and this fracture between the two brothers, and just automatically seeing Desean with this high-powered bulldog of an attorney and his younger brother separated at birth from his mom and brother, living in Cleveland as opposed to Akron, but still enough time to play basketball together. And that part was good, to try and hang out and do something positive, but where did it all go wrong? I see Ethan and his friends as, good, innocent young men who probably watched a video and wanted to have a little devious fun and not knowing just how horrifically wrong it could go when you run into the wrong people. Of course, Ethan and his friends should have never had any splatterball gun, nothing, approached anyone. But of course, the 3 murder suspects should not have retaliated in the way they did. And you can watch people try and make excuses and claim maybe they really didn't know they were hurting him. But after reading this arrest affidavit, as for Tyler Stafford, it says he did knowingly cause an assault upon Ethan Liming, which led to his death. Again, it's alleging that Tyler punched, stomped, and kicked Ethan in the head until he died right there. and it's claiming Tyler also took Ethan's car and drove it to the other end of the lot. I'm not sure if two of the murder suspects jumped in Ethan's car together and drove it to the other side of the lot just to give them no access to a car so they couldn't drive Ethan away. That sounds really premeditated. They wanted to, get in the car, drive it away, so no one could just pull Ethan into that car to save his life? I can have compassion on everyone, but I could still judge fairly and accurately. Sure, Ethan, again, should never have tried whether you want to call it a harmless prank or an assault, he should have never instigated anything. At best, he probably thought he'd get a laugh out of it or joke or whomever was actually firing this toy, but it turned out so wrong. And if anything, this case should show other teenagers and young people not to do the same thing. Let's keep the victim, Ethan Liming, at the center of this case, and let's look for justice for him. Let's look for fairness. I can hold several emotions and thoughts at the same time. I can have compassion for the murder suspects to an extent, for how they likely experienced a horrible youth, looking at some of these experiences and some of the criminal history or records in their youth and everything, and the fact that they were just playing basketball, likely minding their own business. But the tides turned, and the arrest affidavit says they beat and stomped him to death. It's like their anger or their hurt or their fear or even embarrassment, if they were embarrassed in front of this young lady for being initially fearful and running away, and they felt like, oh, I got punked, so I gotta come over here and beat you down until we stomp and kick you and beat you to death? That's ridiculous. What jury would say, oh yeah, that sounds reasonable. I can be reasonable. I can still hold compassion and logic together at the same token without going to any extreme. And at the same token, we don't want Ethan, the victim, to get lost in this. His obituary reads that Ethan David Liming was a beloved son and a devoted brother. He loved sports, baseball, and football. He was a loyal friend, always helping those in need. He was compassionate, an honor student, and he had a radiant smile. Ethan's best friend described him best when he said Ethan didn't care about the color of your skin or the amount of money in your pocket. He cared about what was in your heart. They called him a beautiful angel baby, and they said, we mourn you. It says to perform an act of kindness in Ethan's name, and may his memory be a blessing. So stay tuned for more information. Keep track of the links below as I get the full arrest affidavit. Perhaps I've gotten the bulk of it anyway. Some arrest affidavits are really short, some are totally long. As I try and get more booking photos. The Akron Beacon-Journal has an interesting article about why they stopped publishing booking photos. I can understand their philosophy. If a person is accused of a crime and hasn't been convicted of a crime, yeah, mugshots can be problematic, but if overwhelming evidence is facing them, there is a point to be made for publishing the booking photos. At this point, I want to follow this trial. We'll see, hopefully next month in July, what happens with the grand jury, how the case moves forward. I will continue to keep an eye on it. Hopefully I'll get an interview with Johnson, and we'll see when the trial starts. It looks like unless someone cops a plea, generally the first one to take the deal gets the best deal. So we might see one of these three try and cop a plea and blame the others just to get a reduced sentence. We don't know what'll happen. We don't know if they'll end up eventually confessing or if they'll take it all the way to trial and when that trial will occur. I think it will continue to get plenty of attention because of the circumstances of the case. Ethan being white, his other friend being white, and his other two friends being black. So 2 whites, 2 blacks in the car with Ethan included, and then 3 black males and 1 black female over here. The racial overtones, and it's sad. I just want to keep posted on bringing you facts, not all this hyperbole and emotions and craziness surrounding this case. Let's close with Psalm 91:1. Whoever dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. So that's my prayer for Ethan now that he's resting in the shadow or brilliance or glory of the Almighty, and that I pray for a fair trial, and I pray it doesn't run amok with crazy emotions. More than that, also I pray just facts. Can everyone just stick to facts? Some people are just making so many assumptions without wanting to dig and do the research to figure out, wait, what I'm saying, is it really true? Or is it I'm just saying this just to bolster what I have in my head? Cooler heads can prevail, and we can look at this case and pray for justice, pray for God's will to be done without going nuts. Thank you so much for watching. Stick with me as I cover this case, others, and plenty of other things, and check the links below for more of me over on Spotify video. Take care.